You have always felt too much. While others could watch the world from a comfortable distance, you were born without that protective shield. Every emotion in the room became yours. Every hidden pain in someone's voice found a home in your chest. You learned early that love meant absorbing the suffering of others, and you became so good at it that you forgot where you ended and they began. This is not a weakness. This is not a flaw in your design. What you carry is an ancient gift, one that has been misunderstood for generations. The philosophers and depth psychologists have known this truth for centuries. Carl Jung spoke of individuals who could sense the unconscious currents moving beneath the surface of human interaction, those rare souls who could feel the invisible threads connecting all of us. He never used your modern word for it, but he was describing you. He was describing the empath. But here is what nobody tells you about being an empath. Here is the secret that has been kept from you, perhaps even by yourself. You were not designed to save everyone. You were designed to transform through feeling, to alchemize pain into wisdom, to turn the lead of human suffering into the gold of deep understanding. Somewhere along the way, someone taught you that your sensitivity was a tool for their rescue. Someone convinced you that feeling everything meant fixing everything. That someone was probably a narcissist. You remember the first time you met them, don't you? They didn't arrive like a villain in your story. They came like an answer to a prayer you didn't know you were praying. They seemed broken in a way that called to something deep within you, something that whispered that finally, here is someone who needs what you have to give. They told you things they claimed they had never told anyone. They showed you wounds that seemed to match your own. They created what felt like the most profound connection you had ever experienced, and you thought that this is it, that this is what you have been preparing for your whole life. You didn't know you were being studied. The narcissist has a radar for people like you. They can sense an empath the way a predator senses the gentlest member of the herd. They feel your openness, your willingness to see the good in others, your deep belief that everyone deserves compassion. These beautiful qualities that make you who you are become the very doorways through which they enter your life. In the beginning, they mirrored you perfectly. Every value you held, they claimed to hold. Every dream you shared, they shared. Every wound you revealed, they had one that matched. This is not coincidence. This is strategy. They were building a reflection so accurate that you would mistake it for your soulmate, your twin flame, the other half you had been searching for. But a mirror is not a person. A mirror has no depth. It only shows you what you bring to it. You gave and gave and gave. You poured your empathy into them like water into a vessel, believing that eventually it would be full, that eventually they would heal, that eventually they would become the person they promised to be in those early days. You made excuses when they hurt you. You blamed yourself when things went wrong. You twisted your own perception into knots trying to make sense of behavior that, deep down, you knew made no sense at all. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you are expecting too much. Maybe if you just love them harder, they will finally see. These thoughts became your prison. You built the bars yourself, one rationalization at a time. Here is what was actually happening. The narcissist was feeding on your energy, your light, your capacity to feel. They were experiencing a kind of temporary wholeness by consuming what you freely gave, but it was never about healing. It was about supply. You were not their partner. You were their source. And the more you gave, the more they took. The more you tried to understand them, the more confusing they became. The more you attempted to love them into wellness, the more your own wellness deteriorated. You started to notice that you felt drained after spending time with them. You started to realize that conversations always centered on their needs, their pain, their perspective. You began to see that your feelings were only valid when they served their narrative. But still you stayed. Why does the empath stay long after the red flags have turned into burning buildings? This is the question that haunts you in the quiet hours. This is the shame you carry, the thing you cannot quite forgive yourself for. You stayed because you believed in transformation. You stayed because you thought your love was powerful enough to heal anything. You stayed because walking away from someone in pain felt like a betrayal of your deepest nature. You stayed because they had shown you just enough of that beautiful beginning to keep you hoping, to keep you believing that the real person was still in there, buried under all the defense mechanisms and childhood wounds. You stayed because you are an empath, and empaths believe in the inherent goodness of all people. But here is the truth that will set you free, even though it feels like it might break you first. Not everyone wants to be healed. Not everyone is on a journey toward wholeness. Some people have organized their entire existence around a false self, a constructed identity that protects them from ever feeling the vulnerability of being truly human. The narcissist has made an unconscious bargain with life. They have traded authentic connection for the illusion of superiority. They have sacrificed love for control. And you cannot save someone from a bargain they are not ready to break. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, the aspects we project onto others rather than integrate within. The narcissist has a shadow so vast, so denied, that their entire personality is built to defend against ever encountering it. When you try to bring truth into the relationship, when you try to have an honest conversation about feelings or accountability, you are asking them to look at what they have spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why they rage. This is why they twist your words. This is why they make you question your own reality. You are getting too close to the truth they cannot bear to face, and they will do anything, including destroying you, to maintain their internal illusion. You thought you were in a relationship. You were actually in a war you didn't know you had enlisted in. The empath comes to the connection with an open heart, ready to build something real. The narcissist comes with a hidden agenda, ready to extract whatever they need to maintain their false self. These are not two people meeting in the middle. This is a collision between two entirely different operating systems. And this is why only a super empath can truly destroy the narcissist. Not through hate. Not through revenge. Not by becoming what they are. But through the one thing they fear most. Your awakening. Your awakening does not happen all at once. It comes in waves, in moments of clarity that break through the fog they have carefully constructed around your mind. It arrives in the middle of the night when you lie awake replaying conversations, trying to understand why you feel so confused, so small, so utterly exhausted by someone who claims to love you. The first crack in their illusion often comes when you notice the pattern. They hurt you, and then they convince you that you are the one who caused the hurt. They betray your trust, and then they make you apologize for not trusting them enough. They lie directly to your face, and then they tell you that your memory is faulty, that you are too emotional, that you are creating problems where none exist. You start to write things down because you can no longer trust what you remember. You start to record conversations because their version of events never matches what actually happened. You begin to feel like you are losing your grip on reality itself, and this is exactly what they want. There is a term for this: gaslighting. But knowing the word does not immediately free you from its effects. The empath has spent a lifetime trusting their intuition, trusting their ability to sense truth beneath surface appearances. When the narcissist systematically dismantles this trust, they are not just lying to you. They are teaching you to doubt the very gift that makes you who you are. This is the deepest violation. This is the wound that takes the longest to heal. But something in you is stronger than their manipulation. Something in you remembers what truth feels like, even when your mind has been twisted into questioning everything. This something is not your emotions, which they have learned to trigger and control. This is not your empathy, which they have weaponized against you. This is your essence, the core of who you were before you met them, the part that cannot be gaslit because it exists beyond their reach. The philosophers call this the true self. Jung called it the self with a capital S, the deep center of your being that knows its own reality regardless of external manipulation. The narcissist can confuse your thoughts, trigger your emotions, and distort your perceptions, but they cannot touch this innermost truth. And when you begin to reconnect with this part of yourself, everything changes. You start to notice how you feel in their presence versus how you feel alone. You observe that conversations with them leave you feeling drained, confused, and somehow wrong, while conversations with genuine people leave you feeling energized and clear. You recognize that you have been performing an exhausting dance, constantly adjusting yourself to avoid their anger, constantly managing their emotions while your own go unacknowledged. You begin to see that you have been living in their reality, breathing their air, speaking their language. You have become so focused on understanding them that you have forgotten to check whether they have any interest in understanding you. They don't. The narcissist is not capable of genuine empathy. This is not a moral judgment. This is a psychological reality. They can perform empathy when it serves their purposes. They can mirror your emotions to create false intimacy. They can say the right words when they need to pull you back in. But they cannot actually feel what you feel. They cannot genuinely care about your inner world because they are too busy managing their own fragile false self. When you truly understand this, when you accept this at the deepest level, something inside you shifts. You stop expecting them to suddenly become the person you thought they were. You stop holding your breath, waiting for them to finally see you, to finally value you, to finally love you the way you have loved them. You realize that you have been in a relationship with a projected fantasy, not an actual person. This realization is devastating. It feels like grief, like death, like the ground beneath your feet has disappeared. You mourn not just the relationship, but the version of reality you had constructed to make sense of your suffering. You mourn the time you invested, the energy you poured out, the pieces of yourself you sacrificed trying to make it work. But beneath the grief, something else is being born. Your power. The super empath is not someone who has more empathy than a regular empath. The super empath is someone who has learned to direct their empathy wisely. They have discovered that compassion without boundaries is not virtue. It is self-destruction. They have understood that seeing the wounded child within the narcissist does not obligate them to sacrifice themselves on the altar of that person's healing. You are becoming a super empath when you can feel everything and still choose yourself. This is the transformation the narcissist never anticipated. They selected you because they believed your empathy made you controllable. They thought your compassion meant you would tolerate anything. They assumed your ability to see their pain would keep you forever focused on their needs rather than your own. They were wrong. The same sensitivity that made you vulnerable to their manipulation is now revealing the complete truth of what they are. Your empathy is no longer clouded by fantasy. You feel clearly now. You sense their emptiness, their manipulation, their fundamental incapacity for genuine connection. And instead of making excuses for it, instead of trying to fix it, you simply see it for what it is. This clarity is your weapon. Not a weapon of attack, but a weapon of protection. When you see clearly, you cannot be fooled. When you understand their patterns, their tactics lose power. When you recognize that their rage is not about you, that their accusations are projections, that their love bombing is manipulation, you stop taking any of it personally. You become untouchable. The narcissist senses this shift before you fully realize it yourself. They feel your energy withdrawing. They notice that their usual tactics are not working the way they used to. They observe that you are no longer chasing them, no longer desperately trying to prove your worth, no longer accepting blame for things you did not do. And this terrifies them. Because you were their supply, their source, their mirror. You were the one who reflected back to them the grandiose image they needed to maintain their false self. Without your empathy feeding their ego, without your attention validating their existence, they begin to feel the emptiness they have spent their entire life running from. This is when they escalate. They may become more charming, promising to change, reminding you of the beautiful beginning, telling you everything you have always wanted to hear. This is called hoovering, the attempt to suck you back into the relationship through false promises and manufactured intimacy. Or they may become more vicious, attacking your character, spreading lies about you, trying to destroy your reputation and turn others against you. This is called the smear campaign, the narcissist's attempt to control the narrative and punish you for daring to see through their mask. Or they may do both, alternating between sweetness and cruelty so quickly that you feel like you are losing your mind all over again. But here is what you now understand. None of this is about you. All of this is about their desperate attempt to maintain control over their supply source. You are not a person to them. You are a function. And when you stop performing that function, they will do whatever it takes to either pull you back in or destroy you for leaving. The super empath sees this game and refuses to play. You do not engage with their provocations. You do not defend yourself against their lies. You do not try to make them understand how much they hurt you. You recognize that these are all forms of continued engagement, continued supply, continued feeding of the very dynamic that nearly destroyed you. Instead, you do the one thing that truly destroys a narcissist. You become indifferent. Indifference is not cruelty. Indifference is not revenge. Indifference is the natural state of someone who has finally, completely, understood that the person before them is not who they pretended to be. This is harder than it sounds. The empath is wired for connection. Your entire being resists the idea of cutting someone off, of closing your heart, of walking away from another human being in pain. Even now, even after everything, part of you wants to believe they can change. Part of you still hopes that if you could just explain it the right way, if you could just make them see what they are doing, something would shift. This hope is the last chain binding you to them. The narcissist knows this. They have always known this. Your hope is their access point. Your belief in human goodness is the door they keep slipping through, no matter how many times you try to close it. They understand that empaths give infinite second chances because empaths cannot imagine giving up on another soul. But hope without wisdom is not compassion. It is a trap. Carl Jung spoke of the wounded healer, the person who has faced their own darkness and emerged transformed, capable of guiding others through similar journeys. But he also warned against the helper who becomes consumed by those they try to save, who loses themselves in the wounds of others. The difference between these two paths is discernment. It is knowing when your presence serves healing and when it serves only to enable dysfunction. You are learning this discernment now. You are discovering that true compassion sometimes looks like walking away. That real love sometimes means refusing to participate in someone's self-destruction. That the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to stop playing the role they assigned you in their psychological drama. When you begin to practice indifference, the narcissist will test you relentlessly. They will create emergencies that seem to require your immediate attention. They will reach out through every available channel, finding new ways to contact you when you block the old ones. They will use mutual friends, family members, even strangers to get messages to you. They will alternate between desperate pleas and vicious attacks, between promising eternal love and threatening complete destruction. All of this is noise. All of this is static. All of this is the sound of someone panicking because their supply source has finally, truly, cut them off. The super empath learns to hear this noise without responding to it. You recognize these attempts for what they are, not genuine expressions of feeling but calculated moves in a game you have decided to stop playing. Each time you do not respond, each time you maintain your boundaries, each time you choose yourself over their manufactured drama, you grow stronger. This strength is not hardness. You have not become cold or closed off. You have become clear. You have learned the difference between feeling with someone and feeling for yourself. You have discovered that you can sense someone's pain without making it your responsibility to fix. This is the wisdom that only comes through experience. No one could have told you this at the beginning. No one could have explained to you that some people are not seeking healing, that some connections are not meant to be saved, that some relationships exist only to teach you where your true limits must be. You had to live through it. You had to give everything you had. You had to break yourself trying to love someone back to wholeness. Because only by going that far could you discover where the edge actually is, where your compassion ends and their responsibility begins. The philosophers have always known that suffering is the greatest teacher. Not because suffering is good, but because it strips away illusions. It reveals what is real. When you suffer long enough in a relationship with a narcissist, you eventually see through every lie, every manipulation, every false promise. The pain burns away your denial until only truth remains. And the truth is this: you cannot love someone into loving you back. You cannot care for someone enough to make them capable of caring. You cannot sacrifice yourself sufficiently to fill the void inside another person. That void is theirs to face or flee from, but it is not yours to solve. When you finally accept this, when you integrate this knowing into your bones, indifference becomes natural. It is not something you have to force or perform. It simply becomes your reality. The narcissist is no longer the center of your emotional world. They are simply a person you used to know, someone who played a role in your journey but who no longer has access to your energy, your attention, or your heart. This is what destroys them. Not your anger, which they can feed on. Not your pain, which gives them a sense of power. Not your attempts to expose them, which they can twist into evidence of your instability. Your indifference destroys them because it means they no longer exist in your emotional universe. They have become irrelevant. For someone whose entire existence depends on extracting emotional reactions from others, irrelevance is annihilation. But here is what you must understand. Destroying the narcissist is not your goal. It is simply a side effect of saving yourself. When you reclaim your energy, when you redirect your empathy toward those who can genuinely receive it, when you rebuild your life around authenticity rather than people-pleasing, the narcissist naturally loses their hold on you. They are destroyed not by anything you do to them, but by what you do for yourself. This is the path of the super empath. It is not about becoming harder or colder or more strategic than the narcissist. It is about becoming more fully yourself. It is about remembering that your empathy is a gift meant to be offered freely, not extracted forcefully. It is about understanding that you are allowed to reserve your deepest care for people who can reciprocate, who can meet you in genuine relationship, who can see you as fully human rather than as a source of supply. As you walk this path, you will notice changes in yourself. You will find that you have more energy than you have had in years. You will discover interests and passions you had forgotten about during your time with the narcissist. You will reconnect with friends you had slowly lost touch with, and you will be shocked to realize how much of your social world had been shaped by the narcissist's need to isolate you. You will also face moments of doubt. There will be days when you wonder if you gave up too easily, if you should have tried harder, if maybe you were the problem all along. These thoughts are not truth. They are echoes of the narcissist's voice, still playing in your mind even though they are no longer in your life. The super empath learns to recognize these echoes and let them pass without engagement. You do not argue with them. You do not try to convince yourself of anything. You simply notice them, acknowledge them as old programming, and return your attention to the life you are building. This life is different from anything you knew before. It is quieter in some ways, less dramatic, less intense. There is no constant crisis demanding your attention. There is no one requiring you to prove your worth through endless sacrifice. There is just you, your days, your choices, your slow, steady reconstruction of a self that was nearly lost. Some people will not understand why you left. They will see only the narcissist's mask, the charming public persona, the convincing victim story. They may accuse you of being cold, of abandoning someone who needed you, of not giving the relationship a real chance. Let them think what they think. The super empath has learned that you cannot control the narrative. The narcissist will tell their version of events, and some people will believe it. This is not your concern. Your concern is living in alignment with what you know to be true, regardless of who understands or approves. There is a loneliness to this path. Not the desperate loneliness of the narcissistic relationship, where you were constantly surrounded by someone yet completely unseen. This is a different kind of loneliness. It is the solitude of someone who has stepped off the beaten path, who has refused to follow the script, who has chosen truth over comfort. But in this loneliness, you will find something unexpected: yourself. The journey back to yourself is not linear. Some days you wake up feeling strong, clear, absolutely certain that you made the right choice. Other days you wake up grieving, missing even the painful familiarity of what you left behind. The human mind resists change, even when that change is liberation. Your nervous system was conditioned to the chaos, and now silence feels strange, almost threatening. This is normal. This is part of the process. The super empath understands that healing is not about never feeling weak or confused. It is about moving forward even when those feelings arise. You begin to notice patterns you could never see while you were inside the relationship. You realize how much time you spent walking on eggshells, calculating every word before you spoke it, managing moods that were never your responsibility to manage. You see now how you had shrunk yourself to fit into the small space they allocated for you, how you had dimmed your light so it would not threaten their fragile ego. You remember moments when you achieved something meaningful and felt afraid to share it because you knew they would find a way to diminish it. You recall times when you were hurt and needed comfort but found yourself comforting them instead because somehow your pain always became about their reaction to your pain. You recognize conversations where you tried to express a need and ended up apologizing for having needs at all. These memories are painful, but they are also evidence. They prove to you, in moments of doubt, that you were not imagining things. The relationship was exactly as unhealthy as it felt. Your decision to leave was not an overreaction. It was an act of survival. As you heal, you start to develop new relationships with yourself. You learn what you actually enjoy when you are not performing enjoyment for someone else's benefit. You discover what you think about topics you were never allowed to have opinions on. You find your own rhythm, your own preferences, your own way of moving through the world. This process of self-discovery feels simultaneously like meeting someone new and coming home to someone you have always known. You are recovering parts of yourself that existed before the narcissist, while also becoming someone you have never been before. The experience is both return and evolution. The super empath begins to understand their own patterns too. You examine the beliefs that made you vulnerable to the narcissist in the first place. Perhaps you learned as a child that love required sacrifice, that your worth depended on how useful you were to others, that your feelings mattered less than keeping the peace. These are not truths. These are wounds that were mistaken for wisdom. Carl Jung taught that we must make the unconscious conscious, that what we do not acknowledge within ourselves will arrive from outside as fate. The narcissist was not random. They found you because something in you was calling to them. Some unhealed place that believed you had to earn love through suffering, that you had to prove your goodness through endless giving. This realization is not about blame. It is about power. When you understand what made you susceptible, you can change it. You can rewrite those old stories. You can decide that love should feel peaceful, that healthy relationships involve mutual care, that you are worthy simply because you exist. You also begin to forgive yourself. This might be the hardest part. You carry so much shame about staying too long, about believing the lies, about losing yourself so completely. You wonder how someone as intelligent and aware as you are could have been so blind. You judge yourself harshly for not seeing sooner, not leaving faster, not protecting yourself better. But the super empath learns to extend to themselves the same compassion they have always given others. You recognize that you were doing the best you could with the understanding you had. You see that the narcissist was skilled at manipulation, that they had spent a lifetime perfecting these tactics. You acknowledge that empathy is not a weakness, even though it was exploited as one. Slowly, you stop being at war with your past self. You see that person with tenderness, that version of you who loved so hard, who tried so much, who believed so deeply in the possibility of transformation. You honor the journey that person took, the lessons they learned, the strength they developed through struggle. And you realize something profound. The narcissist did not break you. They revealed to you exactly how strong you actually are. They showed you that you can survive having your reality distorted, your emotions manipulated, your self-worth attacked, and still find your way back to truth. They proved that your empathy runs so deep that even being weaponized against you could not destroy it. You are still here. You still feel. You still care. But now you care wisely. The super empath does not close their heart. They learn to guard it. They do not stop trusting people. They learn to trust themselves first. They do not abandon their empathy. They direct it toward those who can receive it with appreciation rather than exploitation. This discernment changes everything. You begin to attract different people into your life. Relationships become easier, lighter, more reciprocal. You notice how simple healthy connection actually is, how it does not require constant effort or endless sacrifice. You experience what it feels like to be seen, to be valued, to be loved without having to earn it. And in these new connections, you finally understand what was always missing with the narcissist. Mutuality. The basic human exchange where two people care about each other's well-being, where both people contribute, where love flows in two directions instead of draining endlessly in one. This is what normal feels like. This is what you deserve. This is what you are learning to accept as your new baseline. The narcissist tried to convince you that you were too much, too sensitive, too difficult to love. They were wrong. You were always enough. You were always worthy. You were simply with someone incapable of recognizing your value. Now you are free to find people who can. Freedom feels different than you imagined. You thought it would feel like triumph, like vindication, like finally proving to yourself and the world that you were right about everything. But real freedom is quieter than that. It feels like breathing deeply for the first time in years. It feels like waking up without dread in your chest. It feels like making plans for your future without checking first if someone else will approve. The super empath has learned the deepest lesson of all. The opposite of narcissistic abuse is not another relationship. It is not finding someone better who will finally love you correctly. The opposite of narcissistic abuse is sovereignty. It is the reclamation of your right to exist as a whole person, accountable to your own truth, guided by your own inner wisdom. This does not mean you become isolated or self-sufficient to the point of never needing anyone. Humans are built for connection. Empaths especially thrive in authentic relationship. But you now understand the difference between interdependence and codependence, between healthy bonding and enmeshment, between love and addiction. You have discovered that the intensity you mistook for depth with the narcissist was actually chaos. Real depth is steady. It builds over time through consistent care and mutual respect. It does not require drama to prove its existence. It does not need crisis to feel alive. As you continue forward, you will occasionally encounter people who remind you of the narcissist. Same charm. Same mirroring. Same subtle signs that something is off beneath the appealing surface. But now you recognize these patterns immediately. Your body knows before your mind can articulate it. You feel that familiar tension, that sense of performing rather than being, that subtle pressure to abandon yourself. And you simply walk away. Not with anger or explanation or the need to warn them about themselves. You just quietly, calmly, remove yourself from their orbit. This is the power of experience. This is the gift of having survived. You no longer need to learn the lesson twice. The super empath becomes a guardian of their own energy. You understand now that not everyone deserves access to you. Your time, your attention, your empathy, your care are precious resources. You have learned to invest them where they will be honored, where they can create genuine connection, where they contribute to mutual growth rather than one-sided depletion. This selectivity might look like boundaries to others, but to you it simply feels like self-respect. You are no longer available for relationships that require you to be smaller, quieter, less yourself. You are no longer interested in people who need you to be confused, who benefit from your self-doubt, who thrive on your instability. You want clarity now. You want peace. You want relationships where both people are doing their own work, taking responsibility for their own healing, showing up as adults rather than as wounded children demanding to be saved. And here is what happens when you hold this standard. The right people appear. Not perfect people, but real people. People who can acknowledge their flaws without making them your problem. People who can receive your empathy without exploiting it. People who see your sensitivity as a gift rather than a weakness to manipulate. These relationships feel almost boring at first compared to the intensity of the narcissist. There is no constant drama. No emotional roller coasters. No desperate highs and devastating lows. Just steady, consistent, genuine care. It takes time to adjust to this. Your nervous system was trained on chaos. Calm feels unfamiliar. But as you settle into these healthier connections, you realize this is what you were always seeking. This is what you thought you had with the narcissist in those early days before the mask slipped. This ordinary magic of being known and valued, of feeling safe enough to be vulnerable, of trusting that someone will still be there tomorrow. The narcissist taught you what you do not want. These new relationships teach you what is actually possible. You also develop a different relationship with your empathy. You no longer see it as something that makes you a target. You recognize it as a sophisticated form of intelligence, a way of perceiving reality that most people do not have access to. You understand that your ability to feel deeply is not a flaw. It is a feature. It is how you navigate the world, how you create meaning, how you connect with truth beneath surface appearances. The difference now is that you trust what you feel. When your empathy tells you something is wrong, you listen. When your intuition warns you about someone, you pay attention. You do not override your knowing with explanations or excuses or the belief that you should give people endless chances. This is how the super empath destroys the narcissist. Not through confrontation or exposure or revenge, but by becoming someone who cannot be fooled. By developing the wisdom to recognize manipulation before it takes root. By honoring your own perceptions so deeply that no one can convince you to doubt them. The narcissist loses all power over someone who trusts themselves completely. You carry the experience with you, but it no longer defines you. It is part of your story, not the entire narrative. It is something that happened to you, not something that determines who you are. You have integrated the lessons without remaining stuck in the trauma. And perhaps most importantly, you have learned to use your experience to help others. You recognize the signs when someone else is trapped in a narcissistic relationship. You understand their confusion, their hope, their inability to leave. You do not judge them. You remember being exactly where they are. But you also know you cannot save them. They must walk their own path, learn their own lessons, find their own way to freedom. All you can do is be evidence that survival is possible, that healing is real, that there is life after narcissistic abuse. You are that evidence now. You are the proof that empaths can reclaim their power, that sensitivity can coexist with strength, that feeling everything does not mean tolerating anything. You are the super empath. Not because you destroyed the narcissist, but because you saved yourself. And that changes everything.